quiet down, please. Quiet down. Quiet down. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we're going to start today with a KWL. Do you remember what that is? It's a chart that says what you know, what you want to learn, and what you've learned about the Civil War. Okay, so I want you to write down what you know about the causes of the Civil War. And if you remember anything about states' rights, please write that as well. So I'll hand out your charts and start writing the causes of the Civil War. And Johnny, I printed off the slides for you so that you can follow along as we talk and so that you can use these later to write your notes. Okay, class, thank you for writing those things down. So today we're going to talk about the different causes of the Civil War, but we're specifically going to talk about states' rights and how slavery was a big part of that. All right, so we're going to start off by listening to two songs, one from the North and one from the South. And while we are listening to these songs, I want you to answer some questions, and I'll have the words up so that you can use those words to help you answer the questions. So here are the questions I want you to think about as you answer as you listen to the songs. How did the North and South characterize each other? So what did they say about each other? And finally, what are their common similarities between the North and the South? All right? So listen to these songs. Remember the questions, and we're going to the next song called The Bonnie Blue Flag, and this was a Southern song.
We are a band of brothers and native to the soil, fighting for our liberty with treasure, blood, and toil. And when our rights were threatened, the cry strong we are and brave. Like patriots of old, we'll fight our heritage to save. And rather than submit to shame, to die we would prefer. So cheer, cheer for that bonny blue flag, it bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah! Hurrah for the bonny blue flag, it bears a single star.
Okay, so thank you for listening to those songs. Now what I want you to do is turn to your neighbor and talk about what you remember from these questions. I'll leave the words up so that you can. So talk about the similarities and how each side thought about each other. There's the words. So what are you thinking, Susie? Okay, interesting. Yes. They were similar. Yes, very good. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Good. Looks like you're on the right track. Carrie, will you help Johnny? Thank you. Okay, class. Write down, please. Thank you. So, what were some of your thoughts? How were the North and South similar through what we saw in these songs? Yes, thank you. They did think that each other were the bad guys. So the North thought the South was bad because they were trying to leave the Union. But the South thought the North was bad because they were trying to force them to do something they didn't want to do. Very good. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about this drama of the states' rights issue. So we're going to cover a couple of compromises that you guys will be able to see a pattern of how compromise was failing. Now, do you remember what compromise is? Yes, thank you, Thomas. Yes, exactly. Compromise is where each side is giving up something so that everyone is happy. Very good. All right, so let's go to our first compromise. So the Missouri Compromise was our first compromise that we tried to do to solve this issue of slavery among the states. So what did it do? The first thing it did was regulate slavery in the territories. So what it said was beneath this 3630 parallel, which is, if you think about geography, have you heard about latitude and longitude? It's just one of those latitude lines, okay? So below the 3630 parallel, slavery was allowed. Above that line, slavery was not allowed, except for in Missouri. So it accepted Missouri as a slave state. So Missouri was the only one that could have slaves. And we'll see later on how this one starts to become a problem and doesn't actually end up working. So we'll go to our next compromise. So the next compromise that they tried to do was the Compromise of 1850. Now this one was a package of different bills. So a lot of different ideas that they tried to put into one particular compromise. So one of those things that they did was admitting California as a free state. So if you look at the picture, it shows the different colors of whether the states were free, or if they were slave states, or if they were territories that they hadn't decided whether they were slave or free yet. So California was admitted as a free state. The next thing it did was ban slavery ban the slave trade in Washington, D.C. So slaves could no longer be brought into the country through Washington, D.C. The other thing was it strengthened the Fugitive Slave Act. Does anyone remember what that is? Sarah? Perfect. Yes. it was this act that basically said that slaves could be captured in the North and brought back to their masters in the South. So they made this stronger in this compromise. Now the problem with this compromise was neither side liked it. They didn't really agree with it, and so they didn't follow it. And that was kind of the failure of this compromise to solve this states' rights issue, was because neither side followed it and they did not like it. So now we'll talk about our last compromise. So the last compromise is the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now this created the Kansas and Nebraska territories. So these weren't states before, but now they are. And it allowed both states to decide whether they wanted to have slaves or not. And that's what we call popular sovereignty, where the states decide on slavery. This one also repealed the Missouri Compromise. So remember how I said that the Missouri Compromise didn't work? Well, this is the end of the Missouri Compromise, this act. Now this caused a lot of contention between Kansas and Nebraska. And we call the difference here the Free Soilers and the Border Ruffians. So Free Soilers were the people who didn't want slavery, Border Ruffians wanted slavery. So it caused Bleeding Kansas to happen, which was this contention between the North and South. Now we can see that these compromises didn't actually end up working. So now we'll talk about how the election of 1860 ultimately led to the secession of the South. All right, so at the time we had what was called sectionalism. So the North had strong beliefs against slavery, and the South had strong beliefs for slavery. So it divided them into sections. Now this caused the election to have extreme candidates. The Republican candidate was Lincoln, and he was against slavery, and Breckinridge was pro-slavery. So they were the ones that ended up winning in this election. And as we know, Lincoln ended up winning, which ultimately led to the South to say, okay, you don't want us to have slaves? Well, then we're going to leave. So they seceded or left the nation. Okay, so now what I want you to do is talk about, we've discussed how these compromises ultimately failed. So I want you to turn to your partner and talk about what were some of the reasons for the South to secede and the reasons why the South should not secede. So turn to your partner. Good, good. Sounds like you guys are getting it. And remember, this can be used for your homework. Okay, let's wrap up, please. Okay, thanks everyone. Now, this is going to be helpful for your homework because I'm going to show you what you're going to do for your homework. So you're going to pick either the North or the South, and then you're going to write a speech saying why the North or why the South should not secede or why they should not secede. Now, if I were to be the North, I would say, okay, so the North or the South shouldn't secede because we need to keep the Union together. And so you'd write a speech, and next time we will have a few brave souls give their speech. For those of you that don't think you can write a speech, then I'd like you to just write out a list of pros and cons for the South to secede. So next time, keep in mind that you have these speeches due, and we'll see you next time.